Welcome to day 3 of my 3D asset tutorials. Today we'll be looking at topology efficiency and touch on to UV mapping and the importance of saving as well. Now if you just came to this tutorial, please refer to my website. It is www.andrewbooth3d.com. On this site it has so many goodies and so much to look forward to. I have all my tutorial videos here from video 1, day 2 and so on and so forth. I'll be posting all my videos on there every day, so please do keep referring to my website. As you can see, there's many assets to take a sample to. I'm even a little bit of a graphic designer because that's my background, so you also will see other fields that I do work on, so please do take a look. Now one thing that I've been getting is feedback. A lot of you have been critiquing my work, and please do keep continuing critique my work, because critique is important, especially in this industry. I'm always looking into improving my work, so should you, because it is important. In this kind of industry, it's so evolutionary. It will evolve constantly, and you have to keep up with the level of skill. So please do critique my work. Every little bit helps. One of the critiques that's been given to me is to do with this top here. The efficiency could be improved even better by taking away this edge here. To do that, I just go to edge, delete. I delete it completely and start from fresh. Before, I went from this point to that point and across, and it made a quad here, but it was the poly count could be decreased even further by me going to this point, to this direction here, and just continuing going across that direction. By doing this, it's taking away a line here and keeping it quad. And it's cutting the poly count in half, which is needed. As I said in the previous video, poly counts matter. It really do matter, because when you're in a games engine and you're working on a massive scene, all these poly counts count, especially when you have budgets and you work in a big scene, and it becomes costly. And performance, not only that, but you'll have millions of polys for the most simplest of assets. So when you work on a simple asset, even a single poly count. So keep that in mind. Another thing I want to bring to your attention is saving. Always save your work. I showed you this last time. Go to save scene as, and if you set your project by going file set project, you'll automatically bring to your project folder. Now what I do, I always save my progress. The last one was SALT 000, which is the initial start. It being bare to the basics. So if you make a mistake, you can always refer to the beginning. When you get further into the building of the asset, save it as 001. And you save versions like that. By saving versions of your work, you can always refer back to a previous version if you made a mistake or you broke something into your scene. Please do save regular. Do save regular, because Maya do tend to freeze and crash. It is a big program with a lot of software. It's a big software with a lot of functionality, but most of this could be avoided if you keep saving, so you don't lose your work. If you do lose your work when it crashes, it tends to bring up a save button. Do save it then. It won't save it to your actual project folder, but it will save it to your temp folder. When you're working on the Mac, like I am, it is easily found by going to Go folder and always type in this -var -folders. It will bring up your temp folder and it will be located amongst this slot here. All these are the temp folders that's been working throughout the machine. As you can see, a Maya folder has been a Maya file document has already been saved here for RenderMan. All the temps folders go there, so when it crashes it will go to that folder. So don't lose heart if it crashes and you didn't save, because there's always a chance you can get it back. Now what I'm going to do to this, I'm going to make the typology even better and make it more efficient. So normally what I do, I click this button. This is the isolation button. You can isolate your asset, and it's handy when you're working on a single object. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do to improve it, I'm going to take away this. Looking at it, it's not necessary and could be deleted. And as you can see, it drops the polys. The industry look at the tries, which is this. There's 766 polys here. It's not bad for an asset like this. A lot of it could be reduced though, so always constantly being wary what you do. Every edge you put in, think to yourself, is this necessary? What will this do? Why? And just constantly edit your mesh until you're satisfied. As you can see, it's now dropped to 734. Sometimes when it comes to typology and handling poly counts, sometimes it's a trade-off of between what you want in your model and the efficiency. So it's always a constant look and see how you can improve it. Now, and you'll see edges like these. You'll probably think that's not necessary. Why you have it there? But it is. If you want a hard edge, since we are working on hard edge surfaces, this is needed because it creates the edge. If you delete it and then do that, it doesn't look right. You don't have that smooth edge. Now you could technically do that, but do be wary on what you do and all your assets and how it's seen. Now that I've done it, it's made it more efficient and it still creates that curve, but it's a bit jerky. As you can see, it goes down. It's too it's too flat across here. It goes down, 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 and it's not, I feel it's not, personally it's not me, but it's my trade, it's my preference. I trade up that I want it to be more smoother than that. It's all to do a bigger picture and how you want it to look. Like here. These two lines is necessary. This line here secures this flat edge here. If you delete that, it goes down in a diagonal line across there. It goes from that point to that point. If I do it, if I delete it, you'll see what I mean. See, it alters the shape, and it's not the shape that I'm looking for. So it's a trade-off. What you want your asset to look like and efficiency. Now, I would delete this one, this edge here. Actually, second thoughts, no. See, even I'm doing it, it's all about try and error in what looks good. Sometimes you can delete an edge and you can get away with it and lower the poly. Others, once you delete it, it has a major effect and it destroys the look of the asset. Normally I would say this bottom here is not correct and it should not be done this way because it will bring down to a point. But it's not going to be seen that much because it's going to be placed on a table. So all this will be hidden. Some artists would just delete it. They would just go like this and select all the edges and delete it. Because if it's on a table and it's static, it's not being moved, it will save on poly count even further. But since I'm working on it as a physical object that can be moved in the games engine, it has to be there. So like I say, it's all about, you know, customizing and basically functionality. You know, always think to yourself, what is this object going to be used in the game? What polys can I get away with? And constantly judging yourself. That's all it is, basically. As an artist, when you, no matter, it's a bit like when you draw. When you draw, you always think to yourself, okay, what if I put this line in here? You know, what if I draw this line here? And it's the same thing when you're a 3D artist. Manipulate your asset to what you feel is correct. And that is a bonus. It is necessary, trust me. Now, to me, this basic object is done. It's complete, it's efficient, and it's reasonably, the poly is 734. It's very low poly, and that is acceptable within a games engine like Unreal Engine. So what I would do now, I would save. To save the scene, you don't need to save as because you already saved it as 0.001. So the next one I would do is on UV map it. When we say UV map it, it's basically referring to the UVs of this object. Now, UV mapping and UVs, you'll be thinking to yourself, what is that? It's simple to understand. If I open the editor by clicking that button, you'll see a layout like this. This is UV. In 3D world, we refer to the axis as XYZ. When you're unwrapping the model, the actual asset, it's referred to UV. UV. It is basically the translation of this object being flattened out to a 2D flat image, so that you can texture it using 2D images. It's kind of like when you wrap a present, basically. When you, let's say for example, let me show you on Photoshop an example what I mean. Basically, when you have a cube, for example, here's a cube, a basic quick cube. I do apologise for my drawing. As you can see, it's a cube. In 3D space, this is what this is. It's a cube. It's a cube. And as you know, in 3D space, it has 6 sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, when you're texturing it, all the textures are a 2G image, like that. That's a texture. It could be 1024 or 512. It always go up and down. The resolution always go up and down by the power of 2. So next one will be 248, so on and so forth. But this would be the texture. This is the texture that colors and provides all the data to put on there. And when you unwrap it, it's basically the net of the cube. When you're doing arts and craft and you want to make a 3D cube, you create the net so it has like that, don't you? And normally you have tabs where you glue and attach and you glue it. You don't need the tabs on when you UV map it, obviously, but here basically this can be unwrapped to this, which then you can attach the texture to this. So all this texture information, like the normal map, diffuse or base map, all this will turn into this, which then can fold back out into a 3D object. Basically, it's kind of like wrapping a Christmas wrapper around the actual model. Basically, that's the best way to refer it, is when you wrap a present. And the texture is the wrapping paper, basically. Present, wrapping paper. Wrapping paper. That's the best way to explain to it. Now, there's many ways to unwrap UVs. I normally work on a second screen and to pull this into my second screen. I find it's more easier that way. Obviously, because I'm working on recording this tutorial, I can't do that this time. Now, it's all to do with a lot of the UV mapping is due to texture density, and the more UV, the UVs cover onto the actual UV editor, the more bigger the resolution. For example, if you want a 1 in this, if you want this square to be red, this square will be about here. And it's so tiny, because this is so tiny and the text density is so small, it will be pixelated on this side onto the 3D model. So UV mapping is all to do with texture density use the maximum space in the UVs, so that it will increase the resolution, and that is key basically. Also, you have to unwrap your asset correctly. If you don't, you will see distortion. It will be stretched. It won't look nice at all. It will not look nice at all, trust me. Now, how you may ask yourself, how do you know when there's texture stretching, and how do you know if it's unwrapped correctly? Now, in 2016, Maya have a built-in checker tiles. As you can see, it displays in the UVs a checkered pattern, and as you can see, this texture is perfect. It has a check, it has checks, it has letters and numbers, so you know the direction that the UVs are pointing, and it's perfect. As you can see, there's much distortion here. It's not perfect squares here. It's stretched along here, and it's just really ugly, and it's not unwrapped. If you're using a Maya version that is before 16, I think it's 16 they introduced it built in, but in the UV editor. If not, you can assign a new material. We'll be talking about materials in the future, but you can assign a new Lambert material. Go to color and download from Google a checkered pattern. Now you've got one here which displays like that. It has a similar effect to that, but it's not as good, because as you can see the squares are better, and from this direction it looks like it's got good UVs, but it's not. So be careful what one you do use. The best bet is to go to Google. The best bet is to go to Google and type in UV checker. Here it brings up many different UV texture checkers. It'll check your UVs. If it's stretched, you'll notice it even better. I have one pre-saved on my actual model, or actually in my machines. I do apologise. So as you can see, I'm trying to get to my material, but you can't find it because of all these tabs. These are the history of the tabs of your actual asset. It's always best to delete all history, and it deletes it all. And when you add to it, always center pivot. It will center the pivot to your asset, and then freeze transform. Always freeze your transforms. It will save all that memory that you've done to all the previous times you've been working on your asset. Basically, it's a bit like Photoshop. When you in the Photoshop, you have a histogram, which is here. So everything that you do, is displayed in your history. Well, not histogram, but you kind of get the idea. There is history. all your history is displayed in a list in Photoshop. Maya do the same thing. It displays your history, so you can always go back. You always can go back a few steps before if you don't like what you've done. Your material is in that list too. It cannot be deleted, but it's in this list, and you can actually delete. You can actually edit your material through that. So once you downloaded a checker texture, locate it and assign it to it. I saved mine to my Maya folder. I always have a Maya folder with all my essential Maya documents. As you can see, here's the checker that I'll be using. I normally use. As you can see, it shows distortion, stretching, all sorts. Since Maya has updated it to be built into the actual editor like this, I've been using this one because it's more accurate than any download you can get. Also, they have a built-in stretcher. It displays when things are distorting and stretching. Red means it's really, really stretched, and blue means it's distorted and it's squashed, compressed. White means it's correct. So it's correct here, here, and it's getting better around here. So a perfect asset will be almost white. Now you may see in some assets that there'll be a little bit of pink and light blue here and there. That's okay. That's okay. The reason I say it's okay when it's a little, it's about again, it's all about customization and trading off what you want to the performance and in this case unwrapping. Certain objects are very hard to unwrap and will have a certain amount of distortion. In all assets you will have distortion, but it's not about the distortion that matters. What matters is that actual control of that distortion to display less of it as much as you can, so it doesn't show so much, and that's what's key. So I always sign this here. Now I'm going to go through with you now how to set up a good UV preparation and setting up the UVs ready to UV map it. I always click this button here. This button displays the facing of the UVs. Certain times you'll see red and blue. Red means it's back to front. Like for example, if I set this object here, right, this UV shell here. UV shells refer to the actual island, the shell of the actual asset, and you assign the material and textures onto the shell. Now this one, let's take this shell here. You can flip it like so. As you can see, it's turned red. The reason being it's turned red is because it's a different direction to this here, to this UV shell. You cannot have any red You cannot have back to front UVs like that. It is incorrect. Now, there are times when you can use it when you have two textures the same, two UVs and UV shells the same, and you overlay them because they're using the same texture and the same texture. You can overlay it that way. Normally you're not allowed. You're not. It's not industry practice. It's bad practice to have overlaying UVs unless they are used the same texture. By overlaying the UV shells, it's basically using the same UV texture, and you can only do it when you unwrapping, when you actually have the same size as object as that. So you can overlay it like that, so the bottom will have the same texture to the top, basically. You can do that, but by doing that, it will basically save you space, texture, density, and space. So you can increase the size of your texture shells, your UV shells, and to cover more texture, ground, and space, which then would increase the resolution of your acid. But again, only do it when you have the same UV shell like that. But be cautious because it can cause problems. Only do it when you know you can. Another thing that I do to set up and prepare for UV mapping, I click this button here, toggle display texture borders. This displays the borders, basically where the scenes are. The scenes are where you cut up your UVs, where it cuts up your UVs, and where you can unwrap it even further. Like for example, this object you cannot unwrap just like that as a whole, because it goes in a pinch here. You have a separate object here, and it would not unwrap properly. So the best thing to do is to cut up. You always have to cut up your UVs. As you can see, you've got a scene here. That's because of this edge here. As a cylinder, you cannot unwrap the UVs unless you have a line that goes down to unwrap it, to unfold it. Just like you would a wrapping paper or a net of a cube. Now, when it comes to scenes, it can be noticeable. It can be noticeable in the texture. But all that, when you have that, it's about covering it up, make sure it cannot be noticed. A good artist is all about hiding your scenes, knowing where to put your scenes. A good place to put a scene is here, because you won't notice it. It's a transition between two materials anyway. Another bit here. It'd be a good time to put a good scene there, but it cannot be noticed. It's all about hiding and where to put things, basically. When you go to my website, when I refer to my website, and you look at my previous models, let's say for example, I choose this vase. This vase has many scenes, but it's about hiding those scenes. Hiding it, and you cannot see where the edges are. Same when you look at the store here. there are there is so many edge loops here, and so many borders, UV borders and scenes. But as you can see, they're hidden. You cannot tell where they are. And a good artist will always be able to hide the scenes, regardless of the asset or what it is. In some cases you can knit the scenes, but in those cases it's not about hiding it but masking it. You know, making sure it cannot be seen using a good texture. Another thing that I do to set up this UV is by darkening the background. You can't see it on this one here because this is a preset one. It's built in with the actual package, so you cannot darken it. So what I tend to do, I just toggle it off and on so I can see my UV shells. Now, when you UV map it, it's always good to start off with one of these projections. You have 3 projections. You used to have a 4th one known as automatic, where it maps it to the 4 points in space in your top, bottom, sides, forward and back, left and right, basically, to the 6 corners of the of a cube, basically, and it projects it basically from that side, from those points. It's always a good starting point to start off with these points, but they have different effects. When you click cylinder, it unwraps the UVs in a cylindrical way. It is ideal for an object that's cylindrical, like this salt dispenser. So if I go to Photoshop, I'll explain what it's doing. It's basically taking a projection into a cylindrical way. That's the projection. So all objects in it, no matter if it's a cube or anything like that, it's always unwrapped in a cylindrical way. And what tends to happen, you tend to get overlaying UV shells like this, because it's not unwrapping the top or bottom, it's only doing the sides. You can see it in this model here. When I turn on the back, the checkered pattern, what's happening, it's correctly unwrapping the UVs along the cylindrical axis, which is ideal for an asset like this. But once you get to the top, it stretches. The reason being it stretches like this is because there is no projection at the top. There's no projection at the top. Because there's no projection at the top, it's stretching it to the point, to the opposite side of the cylindrical mapping. So basically what it's doing, it's because there's no projection that's pointing downwards, it's projecting there and there, and it's stretching to the point, to the center, because it's going to the point of the center of the origin. Like I say, it's good for an object, a cylindrical object, because it UV maps it almost perfect along the cylindrical axis. But once you get to a face like this, like the top and bottom, you start to see the pinching. It's because it can't compute information because it's not projecting from the bottom. It's not projecting from there. And it's not projecting from there. Another projection, and when you project a UV, you can always undo the projection and start again, or assign a new projection. Another one is planar. As you can see, it's unwrapping it perfectly here, but once you start turning it sideways, you get distortion along this line here, and when you turn to the back, it's back to front, and you still see distortion along the top. What's happening here, if I go to Photoshop, I'll explain what it's doing. It's taking a 3D object like a cube, and then it's projecting on one face and one face only, which means all this along here is not getting projected. That's not a projecting, because it's only assigning the projection across this face along here. And because you're only projecting along this face is getting the same projection of this, which will be backwards because you're only projecting from one side, from one direction. Another projection, as you saw in the menu, is spherical. As you can see, it has it's good for unwrapping UVs with a cylindrical face. So if you change the direction, with all these projections, you can always change the direction of the projection, but always have the same effect. Now if you project from a cylindrical map, when you have a shape like this, it's perfect from the top here because it's unwrapping it correctly. But you'll start to see distortion along the bottom. It's because it's no projection at the bottom here. It's basically, what's it doing? It's unwrapping based on a sphere on one direction. Let's say you have, again, a cube. What it's doing is projecting down here and outwards like a radius. So the top here will be perfectly unwrapped, but as you go down, it would distort the texture. Now you can edit it so it goes all the way around the object, but you'll start to see distortion along these areas here still, because it's not perfect. It's ideal when you've got an object that is round and spherical shape. As you can see, it distorts it along here. Just as I said, it's putting pressure along these areas because there's no information come from the back. There's no information being projected from the back. It's not doing that at all. So it's only using information projected from these axes along here. As you can see, when you go back to the projection, it's only projecting across that map. Now, when you come to UV mapping, you use these projections as a starting point. It's not about completing it using these projections, because you always will have distortion. but it's a starting point. What I like to do is cut up my object. I like to start from the preset from here, and then I like to start with a planar. This is another thing to take notice. It's projecting from the shape of the model, which is okay because it's the shape of the model, but it's not perfect because it's not projecting a proper square. So when you deal with the UV, it's stretched like that. It's stretched because it's stretching out the projection based on the projection on the actual main asset. As you can see, it's rectangular, and because it's trying to fill the actual UV square with a rectangle, it's stretching out. Correct it by going to your editor and squaring off. As you can see, it tends to square. As you can see, this is a good starting point because it shows your the whole model, and it's a good starting point. It solves all messiness. As you get a bigger scene, a bigger object, a more complex asset, the UVs will become more messy. So this is a good to manage your UV editor, and good for preparation. Now, as you can see, it's still got distortion, as I showed you before. So it's all about unwrapping the UVs based off from this starting point. As I said before, all these are appropriate in their own right. These are good for cylindrical maps, like cylindrical objects. This is for more of a single face. I mostly use this one. It may seem strange, but I mostly use this one and this one. I hardly use this. In fact, I vote against it, but it's my personal preference. So I think this is a good place to finish off. And save this time as. Since you're starting to unwrap it, you don't want your model being destroyed. So always do, when you start a new process like the UV maps, always go to a new version. So version 2 for this one. Save as. So next time we'll be discussing in depth about UVs and unwrapping a shape of the UV correctly, including the layout and unfolding the UVs correctly. I hope you enjoyed this session, and see you next time.